Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'll let those coming in now take their seats. And I'll try and start promptly. Obviously, it's Friday afternoon, so I want to keep the energy as high as possible and give us something really to talk about in this session coming up. So we're discussing what will mine action look like in 2030, a strategic approach to mine action innovation. I should say the title maybe, to be more UNMAS compliant, what should mine action look like in 2030? It could very easily look the same if we don't think about innovation quite clearly. The format of today, we're going to speak for about 40 minutes, myself and the other panelists here, who I'll introduce shortly, and I'll introduce myself. And then we're going to give space open to questions and hopefully some lively debate, because I see there's a number of people that I know in this room that are engaged in this question. I'm sure there's many amongst you I don't know who are also engaged. So my name's Matthew Smith. I'm Head of Strategic Programming at the Halo Trust, where I'm responsible for new geographies and new work streams. I come from not from a technology background. I'm actually standing in for our Director of Capability, who sadly couldn't be here. He's been pulled away on a family matter, and he sends his apologies. I'm very much not from the tech side. I'm an end user, sometimes trial runner, so we're going to be hearing from technologists on the panel as part of today. So from a Halo perspective, we've come up with this session. We're grounding this not so much in specific technologies, although we are going to hear about some, inevitably. What I'm talking about from a Halo perspective today is how we are articulating our technology strategy over the next 5 years or so. And I just want to start with some preamble on that. So landmines continue to be used on a prolific scale around the world, killing and maiming civilians while imposing long-term barriers to rebuilding when conflicts end. The tools and technologies that Halo and others use to find and remove mines, bombs, and IEDs have developed incrementally over the last 3 decades, but a leap forward in innovation is required to adequately address the scale of the problem now facing countries such as Ukraine, but not only. Over the next 5 years, Halo is prioritizing investment in technology so that it can deliver more safe land for less. And now the number of mines removed and acres cleared for each dollar spent are directly related to the performance of the technology used to locate and remove explosive items. Improvements in efficiency mean more lives and limbs saved and housing and infrastructure rebuilt sooner. And we and other organizations have long adapted and applied commercially available technology to achieve incremental improvements. But we believe that a strategic investment or investments are required to bring certain advanced technologies from the lab bench to the field and to apply recent advances in edge computing, machine learning, machine autonomy to the challenges of humanitarian demining. The war in Ukraine has once again focused attention on the issue of explosive contamination and provides a significant opportunity to mobilize global resources to drive research, production, and scale up of the next generation of demining technology. So that's sort of the preamble of where we're coming from. Some of how we express this won't necessarily be brand new to some in the audience, but it's a way of it's about how we articulate it internally as organizations, as a sector, but also communicate with technologists that maybe aren't engaged in our sector full time. So on the panel, joining me, we have Armin Haratunyan, who's Head of Research, Innovation, Standards and Operations at GICHD, comes with operations program and strategic leadership across the mine action sector, including at UN and a range of NGOs. Next to him, Adam Harvey is Chief Technologist for Tech for Tracing and is responsible for the project's computer vision detection technologies, which are being deployed with Ukrainian partners. We'll see some of that today. He previously pioneered methodologies for ordnance detection and identification in conflict datasets for the Syria Archive, and coverage of his technology policy work has appeared in the NYT, the Wall Street Journal, Le Monde, and the Financial Times. Last but not least, at the end of our panel, we have Nitin J. Shah, co-founder of Minesight, a non-profit organization focused on deep technology and innovation in humanitarian mine action. NDMUN is an inventor and technology strategist with over 40 years of leadership and hands-on experience in product roadmaps, technology innovation, business strategy, and partnerships. Interestingly, NDMUN is the sole inventor of a family of patents on airplane mode, so you can thank him for that feature on your phone, and recently participated in deploying the first cellular network on the lunar surface. So thank you very much to my panelists for joining me. I'm going to get straight on with my contribution to the presentation, and just to say how we in Halo, in our upcoming tech strategy to be published up to the year 2030, are articulating mostly for ourselves, to keep ourselves focused on what we think the core priorities are at the outcome and output level, but also as a mechanism to communicate outwards to the likes of those joining me on the panel today, who maybe are not engaged with HMA on a day-to-day basis or are new to the sector. And so that's the kind of spirit that I'd like you to view this in. I'll go up first, GICHD going to follow, Tech for Tracing, and then over to Minesight. We'll have a little bit of space for questions in between each presentation, but we're going to try and keep them brief and open the floor for 20 minutes at the end. So, what's the purpose of our technology strategy? Well, there's really three things. We're looking to achieve safety for our staff, but also for the beneficiaries when they're using the land after we've done our work. Effectiveness. What is the net benefit of the assets, the procedures that we're using? And this relies really on good data. How do we collect it? We're very good at collecting data generally as an organization and as a sector. Are we good at analyzing it? Are we good at evaluating it? It's always harder than the collection. I would argue that it often lags. And how do we use it to make decisions? And then the third pillar, or the third purpose, the basic $1 per square meter efficiency output. There are other outputs around EORE, EOD, but how much are we achieving for every dollar of donors' money that we spend? And really that's a key point there. So safety, effectiveness, efficiency guiding the process, and we express it thus in four key areas. Now, we're deliberately not using mine action terminology here. We're trying to think and communicate in a way that external audiences in the technology sector, in academia, are more likely to engage with more easily. Not that we think that's patronizing, but just taking some of the mine action nomenclature out of it for now at this level. So location, pretty simple. Where do we actually need to clear? Obviously that speaks to survey. Detection, the problem is not that we can't find the mines, it's that we find too many other things in the process. So how can we make detection that much more targeted and reduce the number of false alarms per item of EO that we discover? Excavation, we're digging too many holes, too slowly, by hand, and at great risk to our deminers. So how can we reduce all of that? What sort of technologies can we bring to bear to take the human out of it as much as possible and increase safety, productivity, efficiency? And then cutting across all of this information, again, we're very good at collecting data. It goes upwards quite easily, but we've been challenged in our own organization. Does information come down easily enough? Does the site supervisor have in his hand or her hand at the site level adequate mapping in offline formats, able to make tactical decisions about clearance on the ground to a defined mine line? Are we giving them enough tools from the information that we've collected down to field level? And that looks like going for a mobile first, so more digital native, so to speak, approach to our workforce, and promoting digital uptake down to some of the down to field level. So location, getting into the first of those, main inefficiency in land release is clearing land that has no explosive hazards. Again, I said this isn't revolutionary to many of you. We've known this for years, those of us engaged in the sector. And the key indicator here in location is how many square meters are we clearing per item of ordnance found. Now for us, that's very context dependent. In some places in Somalia, where there are indefined mine lines, decades old, we can clear up to 20,000 square meters per explosive ordnance item found, whereas in Zimbabwe, that's as low as around 25 square meters. There's a huge amount of new information out there, new sources of information, open source intelligence. So looking at social media and scraping that to identify areas where we're likely to find EO. UAVs with multiple sensors on them, and satellite imagery as well, including many other different sensors. The challenge is to identify the added value of each new source and to integrate that into an efficient NTS workflow. On the detection side, the graph here is showing our programs, and it's showing the false alarms per EO cleared. So on the left column, after the country, pre-GPR, those are the amount of false alarms, i.e. things that were not mines or EO, that were detected before any sort of ground penetrating radar was performed. And you can see globally, it's around 199. Those countries post-GPR that show a value are those where we have GPR on the program. You will notice some where we do not, so there's no entry. And what does this mean? The overall clutter rejection figure for each country reflects how well the GPR works at rejecting clutter when it's used, and how often the GPR is actually used. So in Angola, for example, we're only at 6% there. Well, we've only got 1 or 2 teams using GPR, ground penetrating radar. In 2003 to 2004, our manual mine clearance teams reported finding 14.9 million metal signals, of which 8.9 million, around 9 million, were discounted using ground penetrating radar, a clutter rejection rate across Halo of just under 60%. So that leaves us with 6 million signals to investigate. Of those 6 million, 75,062 were explosive items, meaning that even once we had applied GPR, ground penetrating radar, at the program and global level, we were still getting a false alarm rate of 80 signals per item of ordnance. Okay, so even after, with the extent of GPR that we have globally, which isn't everywhere and isn't, throughout every program, we're still investigating 80 signals per item of ordnance found. So we want to drive that number far down. So this is the question that we're trying to use to focus our mind on the detection side. When it comes to battle area clearance as well, we reported 3.9 million signals and around 52,000 items of ordnance, so 75 investigations for each item found. And at the moment, we're not yet applying any advanced discrimination or classification technology to BAC, which is something that we would like to introduce. Lastly, excavation. By far the most common activity at the time of accidents in our organization is on, I hope you can see that, at the manual signal excavation. So by far it's the most dangerous thing in the minefield anyway. We don't have, I don't believe we have RTA here, but in the minefield, that's the most common cause of accident. How do we try and move the deminer physically away from that process? How do we lower that risk? We've got deminers out there. We've just seen how many signals they need to investigate before they're actually finding an item of explosive ordnance. That can breed complacency. Many of us will recognize that from our programs of deminers not expecting to find mines and getting complacent and then finding that one. In Zimbabwe, we've removed around 22,500 mines since 2022 of R2M2s, and around under 2% of those we now excavate manually. We've almost taken the deminer completely out of that process with the use of a mini excavator. This is a 1 to 1.5 ton excavator, lightly armored, that we're able to use on this small AP mine. And we've managed to drive accidents down as a result. Significant safety and efficiency improvements. Not only have we got the micro excavator in action, but we're also starting to trial compressed air systems, both robotic and handheld, where you can actually excavate the ground without having to do the manual intrusion that brings that risk. What will success look like? So year on year, when it comes to location, year on year reductions in square meters cleared per item found, getting to fewer than 50% of signals investigated being false alarms. 1 in 2 signals is actually explosive ordnance. We're at 1 in 80 at the moment, so this is a pretty rigorous target to set ourselves. And on excavation, fewer than 10% of mines and IEDs manually investigated. So these are all at the output level for 2030. They're ambitious, but it's targets that we've set themselves. They might end up being aspirational, but this is how we're trying to focus our own minds internally. And it's how we're trying to communicate our key objectives to an external audience as well. Lastly, on the information flow, information's everywhere. We collect almost more than we know what to do with. And with the things I described before around edge computing, machine learning, new multi-sensor UAVs and satellite imageries, the data requirements are only growing and going to grow further. So we need to be quite rigorous. We need to present that information in a clear and concise manner, and question ourselves about who in the organization is actually enabled to receive that information in order to make their operational decisions. And I mentioned before that we want to drive as much of that useful information down to the team leader in the field. They're sending their daily report in. What are they getting back in return? For example, can they see their team's productivity over the last 3 months? And if they can't do that, then we're probably not serving them well enough. In the interest of time, I'll gloss over that. No more paperwork. I think we all agree with that. And just to articulate our vision and how we see things, when it comes to 2030, what will it look like? What should it look like? Humanitarian mine action and mine clearance. Specifically, we're really talking about land release here, but obviously EOD, EORE does feature. We're looking at accurate polygons, incorporating evidence from multiple sources. That's on the location side. Multiple layers of analyzed remote sensing imagery available at the site supervisor level. We're going to see from Tech for Tracing a good example of that. Detectors which result in less or fewer than 50% of signals turning out to be false alarms. Again, remember that even after GPR has been applied globally for us at the moment, that's 1 in 80. So there's a hell of a long way to go. More than 90% of our detections being investigated by remote or semi-remote methods. And that would actually end up changing our training. Maybe we have fewer people that are actually trained for manual excavation. And you might have a situation in the future where you look back and think, wow, I can't believe we actually sent thousands of people to dig these things out with our hands. It could look, or I hope it will look that different. Detailed data collection from all machines and detectors, easily accessible and being able to be analyzed at least at the operations manager level or by the site supervisor, and digital tools for all mapping without paperwork. So in the interest of time, I will move on there. We will take a short break for any questions between panelists. So if you have any, please raise your hand, put your mic on, but we are going to make space at the end for further questions and discussion, because we'd like to hear from you what 2030 should look like. Okay, if no one for me right now, I'll pass on to Armin. You can have the clicker. Yeah.
Hi everyone, good to see you again. Almost over. I wasn't going to do slides, but when I saw Mads, I did. I'll try to. I'll try to slightly make it more dynamic. So you saw Mike's figures with the Hello Trust strategy is aiming towards $1 per square meter. We've been talking about the $1 per square meter for the past 25 years. We ain't getting there. Who can tell me what do you think is a current cost per square meter if you take all countries, put them together and then extrapolate the figure? Just shout out. Just shout, yeah. 4. Anybody else? Be brave, be courageous. No accountability. 4. Okay, I won't tell you the number. Who can tell me how many square meters do you clear to find one item of explosive ordnance who is not Erkin? How many square meters of land do you clear to find one item of explosive ordnance? I don't think it depends. No. 100. Much higher.
I can say 1 to 5,000.
That's a quite wide range. Yes, higher.
Depends also about non-technical survey or technical survey.
Yeah, I'm talking about clearance here. Yeah, not going into land release. This is much more complex. Who can tell me how much does it cost to clear one item of explosive ordnance?
$1,000.
Thank you. Any other estimates? Oh, come on. What happened with the brave sector?
After lunch.
After lunch. Okay. Thanks. The reason I'm saying these figures is because we've actually done, I think it was for the first time ever when such a data was put together. For a period of 2015-2019, we ran quite an extensive quantitative research funded by Switzerland. Thank you very much, Jonas, for that, and a few other donors, to come up with a global data. Again, this is global data, so each country will have different set of data. And why we're doing it? Because innovation exists to promote efficiency and effectiveness. And efficiency is all about cost. Effectiveness is about clearing less land, finding more mines. Yeah? And Matt also mentioned safety, which I'm not covering there. But those figures are important figures. We have to bear in mind why we're doing it and how we're doing it. So, it's $3. Erkin, you get close, yeah? To clear land. It's 1.29 to release a square meter of land. It's 6,190 square meters to find one item released, and 1,800 square meters to find one item cleared. 1,800 square meters is probably the size 5 times, this is what, 50 by 50? 10 times this room. So we need to manually clear the area equivalent to 10 times of this room to find one item of explosive ordnance. This is what we need to try to avoid. This is the location, the detection, and then the excavation part of it that is quite important. It costs $3,144 to clear an item of explosive ordnance. It usually costs much less to manufacture that item of explosive ordnance, either locally or centrally. So that's some figures to continue. You saw it. I was going to have another quiz. This is just to continue thinking about why do we talk about innovation and efficiency effectiveness. The figures are not great, nowhere close to where Matt is trying to aim, and we need to be innovative and more innovative to get there. Matt mentioned about the fact that one deminer excavates 98% of the signals without finding any mines. How many square meters of land do you think one deminer clears per day? One manual deminer, yes? 20. You saw the slide? No. Okay, I won't torture you. It's 22 from the global data. And an average deminer spends 57.5 days to find a mine. Again, another staggering data. Again, this is global data. This is across mines and cluster munitions and all that. But it's facts and figures from real countries and real mine action operations. The data came from national authorities, all the operators, validated and triangulated. So I'm pretty confident about the figures. And It depends, as you said, sir, because the figures are actually quite different across. Some countries are moving towards more efficient, more effective outputs, some are not so fast. So what? How can we continue moving the sector? First, let's continue. Was a raised hand there?
If you could put again that slide with that.
You want to take a picture? That all this data is on the website. If you Google GICHD operational efficiency study, you'll have 156 pages of this data. So the main, and we've done, with Pedro, we've done a stakeholder analysis at the Innovation Conference in 2022, and I know many of you would have seen the slides, but the main reasons behind inefficiencies and ineffectiveness, which does not help innovation, is cost effectiveness and limited funding. We're all trying to fight for the same funding, and there's no dedicated funding for innovation. It's quite difficult to find funding for innovation. I think we'll talk about that later on. We all want to fund land release, clearance, risk education, victim assistance to a lesser degree, advocacy even less nowadays in a modern world. But not many funding goes to innovation, to be able to try, make mistakes, fail, improve, and so on and so forth. Silver bullet, there have been so many silver bullets presented to the sector for the past many years. We need to be able to learn how to put all the silver bullets together to produce something that kills the, whatever it is that the silver bullet kills. Inadequate collaboration coordination, and I'll cover what GICHD is doing on that in a while, but we are reinventing the wheel many times for the past 15, 20 years. We need to see how we can learn better together, and not have the same drone flying in the same area, in a different country, gathering photos and lots of data and a massive amount of data, but so what? Is data being analyzed, used, put in practice, and so on and so forth. Lack of uniform legal and regulatory framework. And we can talk about, I hear quite a lot, national or international standards are a bottleneck for innovation, but it'll be good to have some specific examples. If you have any in mind, I'm happy to take those on board, or there are colleagues in the room who know NMAS and IMAS by heart and can probably help me bust the myth. And of course, the favorite one, why fix it if it's not broken? The resistance to change in the sector is quite high, as we've been talking with colleagues here. But I believe we are moving that bar, and there's more and more of us who are putting our innovative mindsets and trying to see how we can do things better. In GICHD, to help, to be a part of resolving this problem, we put together what's called Innovation Hub, with Pedro, who is in charge of it, and his team, and many of you are part of this hub. And the reason we do it is to promote efficiency, to promote effectiveness through dedicated research activities, to creating research agendas that are needs-driven and not supply-driven, to create a forum where stakeholders can come and define the problems together, so we can then find the solutions for the problems defined by the stakeholder, and not by somebody external who had yet another great idea that might not be applicable at the end, but also to foster partnerships and help to connect the dots, and you've heard that so many times probably over the last 3 days about connecting dots. That was it from me. Sorry, I was talking fast, interest of time.
Any brief questions for Armin before we introduce Adam to talk to us about remote sensing? Okay. Are you going to keep it to the end? Okay. Thanks very much. All right, Adam, over to you.
Okay. Thank you for both of the previous talks. Learned a lot already just from these 2 10-minute talks. My name is Adam Harvey, and I'm the technologist at Tech for Tracing. And I'll be presenting about remote detection using computer vision with drones for objects on the surface. and would like to begin addressing the title of this session, that it feels like this, not to be, overspeak, but we could have been having this 5 years ago. And I think in 2025, now we're asking what it's going to be like in 2030. And my vision is that it actually looks like what you could do in 2030, because there's a lot of technology that's either not being used or taking too long to be implemented. And of course, that's part of the reason why I'm here. And part of the reason that you're here is to learn from each other. Every time I've been at an event like this, I've learned, and I see technologists sharing something they've learned. And I think if we just had more workshops every month or every week, we could actually get there by 2030. A little bit about Tech for Tracing. We are an EU-funded Dutch, German, and Ukrainian humanitarian NGO tech lab, created by counter-proliferation experts and AI developers. So we create, mostly what we're working on is detection with computer vision. And mostly that means using an RGB image from a drone shot directly down and detecting small objects in large images. From a typical drone, you might get a 20 megapixel image, yet the object that you're looking for could be a PFM1 anti-personnel mine that is only a few pixels in the image. So it's a difficult problem to solve for that reason. The core beneficiaries that we're working for are national authorities, including CESU and the Ukrainian Minister of Interior, and headquarters is in Netherlands, and I'm based in Germany. So that's the preliminary overview, and I think what we're here for is to present what we're working on, what we have developed, and to integrate with all of the minds here to figure out how standards can be applied to this technology, to streamline it, to help it get it into use quicker, more safely, and more efficiently also. If the whole purpose of AI is to save money, why should it cost so much money to get this technology on the ground? It shouldn't, and that's what we're working on. Which is to say, we're building AI detection software, not open source, but a little bit. We're learning from the open source movement, and I would say we're applying that to the community. We're bridging the gap with different partners, and we're forming partnerships where we can share the technology that we develop. We don't want to, as Armin said, a lot of people are, keep reinventing the wheel. It's expensive to reinvent the wheel. And if 10 people are reinventing the same wheel, if you all made one wheel, that could be a really good one. And that's kind of the idea, that's our approach. We are not only working in Ukraine, but also building and thinking about how this technology will eventually be applied to other areas. Each area is a specific problem. In a heavily forested area with different drone, different weather conditions, each area needs to be studied, and a solution needs to be slightly custom tailored. Here's an example of a typical drone image. Now imagine looking at thousands of these images every day and looking for the munition, if there is one. There is one in here, and it's very difficult to see, and computer vision is very good at that. And there's a tank mine, and it's easily detected with computer vision. In this case, that tank mine was very much exposed on the surface. The fuse was visible, as well as the full kind of shape and outline of about a 32 by 32 centimeter tank mine. This is the secret here on this slide. This is how it all works. When people are talking about AI detection, remote sensing for mine detection in NTS, this is the workflow in one slide. You begin with a survey of several hundred photos. Then you run it through two programs. One is to create the orthomosaic, and the other is to create the detections. These get merged together, and you have GeoJSON, which is a polygon that gives you the latitude and longitude of the object. It's, in some ways, not that hard, and that's why there's some frustration from a technical perspective that this could have been done a lot earlier, and we need to, I think, be able to increase the velocity to get this technology into the most important places. Here's that tank mine again, maybe a different one, and you can see it's covered slightly, it's occluded, not completely, but you have about 50% of the object is occluded by brush, and it still has a very high detection rate. You don't need that much visible, but we are, to be clear, I'm working on a specific problem, which is mines on the surface that are visible in the RGB spectrum. We do have general rules for standards. There could be a standard about the altitude to fly your drone, the megapixels of the sensor, and the speed that you would capture at to, say, avoid motion blur. Here's a recent trial of a polygon in Ukraine running our algorithm for a few tests, and some people in the room were there. So you can see here, there's one gray polygon. As mentioned, there are false positives. There will be things that look like a tank mine. It could be a hubcap. There are a lot of things that may look like it, especially in areas with a lot of trash. So those items will often show up with a lower confidence, and they need to be marked as, not the object. So the reviewer triages the survey, beginning with the highest confidence items, and then moves down the list. And pretty quickly you can confirm if it's a confirmed hazard area by marking at least a few. And then what happens is you begin to see a pattern. Very often the tank mines are dispensed in a pattern, but that's only for tank mines, and there are a lot of other objects, so I'm showing one use case here. The other key parts of a software that we're developing called Vulture, and this is where it becomes important to hear feedback from our operators on the ground, is what are the features that you need. There's the technology, but then there's the interface to it, and making that technology usable. One of the features that we implemented is that the entire system can be run offline. No internet at all required, not even for the maps. The maps load up in the background, the entire world, and the detection runs completely locally on the computer. And I think that's a good thing, because there can be security risks associated with having a Starlink internet access point nearby, and you may just be in a remote area without any internet at all. Going a little bit faster now, but here's a preview of this software. It has two parts. One is the geospatial data management, and we're calling that Vulture, and this is a preview of how that works. So you begin with predictions that need to be confirmed, and you go through each prediction, and you can zoom in, and you can see the objects around it, and then mark it as confirmed. And when you're done, the survey is marked as completed and can be exported to GeoJSON, or it could be integrated with a larger enterprise system like ARC is, or you can export PDFs or images to share on WhatsApp. We realize that's actually very useful to have that ability to share snapshots of it. And there's also multi-language support and a database of renderings of the 3D models that we have of each object to help the operator confirm that it is that object. It's actually pretty straightforward software interface. The whole idea is efficiency. how fast can you make the process of reviewing it? And it's quite fast. So you can review an entire survey like this, at least the predictions, in a matter of minutes. And that's an example of the export. Now getting on to a few of the other things that we're working on, but real quick, is the replicas to help with classroom training. And these have a wide range of quality and different materials. Quite a few people are making them. We also make them, but our idea is to provide them, to lower the cost for having replicas and make it much easier and a direct relationship with our partners to produce them. And here are a few of the objects. What is nice 3D printing is developing fast, and every year it has new capabilities. It's very easy to directly print an object out in full color with metallic or even rubber. It's called TPU materials to make a very realistic for classroom training purposes replica. And here are just two renderings of those in the actual print. This is a Palm 3 anti-personnel mine. And that's what they look like in context for an actual training exercise. So to wrap up, I will say that our approach is really to try and bring people together and not take this, maybe it works for different industries, but we're trying something new. We want to work with people to develop the technology and not think of the technology so much as a product. We want to integrate more partners, and because the technology developed so quickly, it's more of an ongoing relationship. We can't simply deliver an AI and walk away because AI is developing so quickly. In half a year, there will be a new technology, a new algorithm, and believe me, as the person who's training all of these, the software is updating faster and faster, and it's just not something that you can do and have a definitive endpoint. It's a real continuous process. And I think by next year, and especially by 2030, this technology is surely going to become even more powerful, capable, and faster, cheaper. Right now, you can already run it on your laptop. So the approach of having to put everything in the cloud is no longer necessary to have huge GPUs crunching the imagery. A little bit over time, but I am excited about that point of bringing it all offline and delivering it to partners in a direct relationship. I think that's the end. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adam. And we might actually get to $1 per square meter if we can get that level of clarity in the survey. Obviously, that's a very specific example there. You've got a quick question?
Very short question just for him. Thank you for your nice presentation. I just want to ask if the soil difference, is it affect your system or it's normal? In any soil can works?
Any soil?
In any land can works or not?
Didn't quite hear, but I think you said soils, the dirt. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, it is important, as I mentioned in the beginning, to fine-tune the AI computer vision to the specific environment. There will be differences, if not in the environment, then also on the camera. So if the drone camera changes, the optics change, and the sensor changes, and that does affect. It is, the problem is really this extremely small object detection and maximizing the computer vision performance on extremely small pixelated objects. And every opportunity to squeeze out more performance is important. And it is then important to consider the color of the dirt, the light, the color of the light, and if it's very sunny, the shadows. So every little detail from an optical perspective does matter if you want to squeeze out that last bit of performance.
Thank you very much.
Lovely, thanks. Sorry, I'd just like to move on to Nitin, so he's got time to talk, and then we'll come to you first, and when we do questions, if that's okay. So Nitin, please.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. That was very interesting, Adam. Thank you. So my name is Nitin Shah. I'm with a company called Minesight, a company you've probably not heard of. So we're a very newly formed nonprofit. We're a technology startup and focused entirely on humanitarian mine action. Our founding team is only about 5 people, but due to collaborations and so on, we leverage the skills of many others in what we're doing. So being a newcomer to the sector, the first thing that we did was try to understand the landscape of the whole sector. So a few months ago, I organized an invitation-only session where we had invited experts from the humanitarian mine action sector and people from the innovation community. So the first thing I was checking was for culture. In other words, the technologists were enthusiastic and capable, had great ideas about how they would be able to improve the mine action efficiencies and cost and so on. And on the right-hand side, the humanitarian mine action community, very open and willing to new ideas. So I'm saying, this is great, it's all working well. As I delved deeper, I realized that there was a number of issues or impediments to the adoption of new technologies in this area. And by the way, I was asked to talk about our approach towards this area of innovation. And the main thing that I can say is innovation cannot be done in isolation. So I'll go through these impediments. Firstly, what I realized is that even though in general the technologists understand the general direction of what needs to get done in the mine action area, very few of them had actually read the report that Armin showed you with all the numbers and the ratios. Earlier this week, I actually spent some time with the authors of that report to go through what do all these metrics, what these measures mean. So the level of communication between the two areas is actually surprisingly low. The second is, so by the way, a lot of the focus in that conference that I had was focus on what are the needs, and we had good representation from a number of the NGOs, experts across the world in understanding that. The second one is regarding technology. So this is not where, as they say, move fast and break things. This is not the kind of technologies that you can just kind of willingly just go away. I mean, there are hard technical problems. Our own company is very much focused on what they call deep tech. We're not just skimming the surface. We know that these things are difficult. The requirements, the performance requirements are hard, and the operational requirements in terms of operating equipment and technology across the world in different regions is hard, including the impact on the environment and so on. So as we started to learn deeper and deeper, there are significant impediments, as I said, to innovation being adopted. A third one was regarding standards and certification regulations. Those are sort of perceived as barriers in a way, but the lack of understanding of those, and again, as you know, the Geneva Center is working on next revisions of the UNMAS standards and so on. And what I found is actually there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of openness within the standards, but the standards are there for reasons, for safety, consistency, and so on. So you cannot ignore them, you can comply, and in fact, in my discussions with the Geneva Center, they're very flexible. If you bring in a new technology, no one's going to stand in your way, but you are going to have to adhere to the basic principles. The final thing was about money. In other words, this market is quite small. So coming myself from a commercial environment, the market is small. There's no major sort of growth in doubling, tripling, quadrupling your revenues and size of market. So we've been looking at technologies which are perhaps in adjacent markets, not applied to humanitarian mine action, which could be adopted in order to help in this area. So again, there's little market incentive, and then in terms of funding, the amount of money that is focused only on innovations is very small. There are innovation teams across the whole sector, particularly, again, the Geneva Center with the Innovation Hub work is very important. On the other hand, the actual amount of R&D spent is fairly small and not sustained in this sector. So again, talking a little bit about my own company, our approach is this, and I won't read it out, but you can kind of see where we fit in, which is that our intent is to not necessarily develop technologies from scratch, because I think that's fairly insane. Identify technologies which have relevance, and then understand the gap between what is available today in the various segments, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, and then apply them in a responsible way. So again, testing, development, validation. And this is important in the sense of making sure that we as a company are collaborating with the end users of these technologies. So this is that little thing on the right-hand side, which is transfer, but also then understand the problem statements to begin with. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about mapping our own thoughts onto the structure that we've seen already from Matthew. So I'm not going to repeat the 4 sectors or segments that Halo Trust has identified, but frankly, this is something which is very helpful for us. We talked to MAG, FSD, Norwegian People's Aid, and so on. And I think these are very helpful in terms of, for a technology community to understand what are indeed the areas that one needs to focus on. So location, and this is where in red I kind of put my interpretation on the skill sets that we're building in my team and what I'm trying to drive them to in terms of what the end results would be. So, for example, in the area of location, we're bringing people in who really understand how to use data to take decisions and actions from other industries, from the mapping industry, GIS, some other previous experiences, but really trying to understand how multiple layers of data of different types have to be layered on top of each other and in parallel processed such that you can improve the confidence level and reduce, therefore, the risk level of the decisions to be made. So again, it's layering of data, the analytics, and then the decisions and actions which are taken. I'll talk about detection actually on the next slide. And on the area of excavation, we're bringing in skills regarding robotics and automation. We've been looking at technologies which come, say, from the manufacturing industries, from medical industries, where there's a lot of innovative work in that area. So we're bringing in skills which really allow for the vectors that, again, Matt talked about earlier, which is reduce the exposure of the human to the risks in the field, and then also adhere to environmental safety and not create solutions which maybe excavate better, but then create residual problems in terms of the contamination of the soil after you're done. So there is, again, actually an initiative that we're starting, which is an open innovation challenge in this area, in order to crowdsource ideas and technologies in this space. So this is another area where, again, going back to understanding what are the regulations, what are the requirements, adherence to quality assurance and safety are all important principles. The final thing I'll talk about, and I won't make it very elaborate because I think Adam covered it very well, which is, how you use information in general in terms of processes. So this is where, as you saw on the Halo slide as well, we think that information is really a layer that transcends and follows the full workflow across. And then secondly, it is again about how you make better decisions and improve efficiency. The other thing I was thinking of as I was reviewing the report that Armin showed the other day, which is metrics from multiple countries over multiple years. Why don't we have something which is in real time, which can then help decision makers in the field to be able to say, here's what I've learned for the last few things on my operations, maybe from other operations, and do continuous improvement. And this is something I learned actually from this event I held, which is to say that innovation, incremental innovation, has already been done in this sector by the operators, by a lot of the community over the years. So as I track some of this data, there have been improvements in many of these metrics. So to some extent, the barrier for me is even higher, which is how can you find things which may be new, disruptive, and really make a significant transformational difference in performance. The next thing I'm going to dig in a little bit more detail, and it'll just take a couple of minutes. If you go to the consultants, they'll tell you that you follow kind of the process at the bottom, which is identify needs, develop use cases, do all this stuff in terms of product market fit, and then transfer over. Life is seldom that simple. And so what we've been doing specifically in the area of detection is, I have a couple of experts who are very, very aware of pretty much every detection technology on every wavelength, from optical to X-rays to neutrons and so on. And then what we've been doing is sort of cataloging and understanding the performance of each of those vis-a-vis the different use cases. But at the moment, we haven't put any in the field. As it turns out, what we found is that as a result of a number of interactions, and this will be in the next few months, we've identified a specific use case which matched, so this is kind of matchmaking, matched a particular technology which was quite mature, and we had to do a very minor level of adaptation in order to close the gap between where the technology is now and where it could be used in trials soon. So within a matter of about 3 or 4 months, we're able to identify the use case, identify the gaps, do that matching of the solution, and actually are probably right now shipping the equipment into a marketplace, a particular contaminated area for doing the initial trialing. And we're doing that, again, in collaboration with a number of operators and collaborators. So the point is, maybe we got lucky, but I think the idea is the methodology, again, which is largely what I'm talking about, is we're trying to understand the market space. We have a good knowledge of what technologies outside the HMA sector are available through the networks that we have. And we're really trying to understand where those matches are, and obviously systematically identify those gaps. And that's where we're spending our resources and money, which is to really close those gaps, do the trialing, and address many of those impediments that I mentioned in my very first slide. And then maybe I'll stop here, which is about our view of what would humanitarian mine action look like in 2030. And these are a little bit less technical, but really operationally what our team is looking at, which is better communication. So this is a challenge perhaps to all of you, which is if you have thoughts, ideas, things that you see, problem statements that you have, doesn't have to be big. They can be quite modest, but things that you see are impediments in your progress, communicate that to us, either through Geneva Center, which is fantastic, or to me or my team directly, because I think only by immersing ourselves, and I'm repeating something I said, innovation doesn't happen in isolation. We, as a new team to the sector, although we're certainly I am quite old, and have seen many different technologies, but really understanding the genuine problems, so the communication and the improvement of that, we hope as a company and as a community to be much better at that. The other thing that I've mentioned a couple of times are the KPIs, or key performance indicators. After I looked at the reports that have been published by the Geneva Center, as I mentioned, I'm thinking of KPIs that a technologist would be able to measure and be able to really relate to what the operational people want. So it's not only technical parameters, but the operational side as well. And so it really has to be down to where what will work in the field, in the different markets and different communities that you serve. And then the final one is about resources. Money in general is hard. Sometimes when I go to my own sponsors, I feel like I'm in like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, if you're familiar with that, which is for every project, we are held accountable. But the good news is there are funders and people who really believe in technology to make a difference in the world, who are willing to invest and contribute to this sector. And that's the fuel that we have in our company to be able to serve yourselves. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Nitin. There's lots to chew on there. I'm going to go. I've got a few questions for the panel myself, but I'll go first to the audience, actually. And if anybody would like to come in on Nitin's particularly, before I go to this gentleman here, who I promised to visit following Adam. So if anybody's got a question I'd like to pick up for Nitin, we'll go to you first, and then we're going to come to you.
I like your presentation very much, sir, but you mentioned something about your presentation, during your presentation, that also you need some luck. And also you mentioned that you are not going to double or triple the income. How your investors are looking in your risk and this investment which not offer good or very high profit?
Yeah, so my current investors who are anonymous are philanthropic donors, but they're not donors in the sense of your community. They're really sponsors of our work. So they're not looking for a financial reward. What they're looking for is making a big difference. So I hope that answers the question. And that is the kind of funding that I look for in my community, just to add to that, which is there are, and I've identified and I'm negotiating with people who are very excited about putting money in to make a difference in this world, but maybe an assignment for you, which is I need stories. I need, just like the Dragon's Den or Shark's Tank, I can't come in and say, oh, we're just going to reduce the dollars per square meter. That's not going to work. They need to understand at a much more detailed level of exactly what is it that we can do to actually make them write the checks. So it is not an easy challenge, but that is the way that our money works. Thank you.
And this gentleman here.
Thank you very much. This is Ali Askari from York University in Toronto. I have two questions for Mr. Harvey, please. First question is, these are two technical questions probably, but the first question is what kind of drone do you use for those cases that you showed? And the second question is, are you considering or have used already multispectral images in combination with RGB images for this particular case? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Easy question. We use DJI drones. They're very stable. They come with software that helps the stability in the wind, which reduces motion blur. And the other part of that is some drones are quite complicated to fly, so there's no real preference for DJI, but if you want to get the drone operator operational, when you're in the field, there are a lot of other challenges. And it's nice to have a package that's ready to go as a turnkey solution. The DJI also offers multispectral drone, and there are other quite unique cameras that offer multispectral. We've looked into it, and we haven't found a silver bullet in this spectral range yet. We do think that there's more work to be done, and that the possibilities will vary between different munitions, and it may be specialized to a certain type of plastic. So I guess what I'm saying is it probably isn't a catch-all solution in the way that RGB is. And RGB is very stable. It's proven to work, and there is a little bit of extra information that probably the computer can use that people aren't taking advantage of. And I think, the title of this is what will it look like in 2030. There has been a lot of people are experimenting in multispectral, but I think there remains to be finding the magic formula between the combination of different spectra to make that signature unique enough that it can add to it. Probably I'm just going a little bit further, but probably the most useful case of multispectral right now, as you may know, it's very big in agriculture, is looking at whether something is a plant, so whether it has chlorophyll in it. And that's a useful way to reduce false positives, because some of the munitions, like the PFM1 anti-personnel mine, looks like a leaf. So if you can reduce false positives with multispectral, but then it goes back into the cost equation. How many thousands of dollars do you want to spend compared to having a image analyst look at the drone image and distinguish it?
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, I'm Angela De Santis from FSD. I have a provocative one for Armin. You know. Yeah. So I think you mentioned in your presentation about the resistance of the sector, of mine action sector, to changes. But maybe this resistance is due to the fact that then it's very difficult to include innovation or innovative solution into our normal workflow, because we need to follow UNMAS, we need to follow the national standard, we need to accredit new solution, and we need to send the miner on in the field anyway. So it's very difficult to convince the donors to accept this additional layer of information that for us maybe could be very useful, but at the end of the day, I need to put my miners in the field. So what's your solution for that bigger gap? Because if not, in 2030, we will still have the same conversation, we'll have innovative solution, but on the practical side, operational side, we will never see them as an extra tool in our toolbox.
Do you want to take this one?
She said
Thanks, Angela. I mean, it's not really a provocative question. It's a question we always have. I believe and having been in the sector for a couple of years, for the first time over the past couple of years, we are talking about it more and more aggressively. I think there's much more interest in innovation, increasingly so. I don't know if the new Swiss strategy has innovation in the strategy, but innovation is one of the 3 pillars of the Swiss strategy. It's one of the 3 pillars of the GFO strategy. It's one of the 4 pillars of the Luxembourg strategy. And this is the 3 that come to mind. There is an increased interest from philanthropic foundations, private foundations. We're being approached by a number of donors. So it's just, to me, it's just a matter of capitalizing on that, continuing to do it. Advocacy on innovation needs to be funded, or otherwise you will not bring that $3 down to 1. But also see where we can find synergies through coordination, not repeat things. Make innovation cheaper and advocate for it consistently. Angela, this will be my response to that. I don't think money is an issue. I think it's where we get it from. Warren Buffett has spent $100 million on innovation in Ukraine in the past 1 year. That's a huge amount of money. Did it answer your question?
I very much agree. Sorry, just to add from a programming perspective, your incentives are get out, get the results, do what you know, and even although the donors very much do put it in tender paperwork and in their own strategies, it's nonetheless, it's not always the highest when it comes to actually marking those tenders. You'll often not win or lose a tender based on your innovation contribution. So I think if we have had any success in recent years or interesting things going on in our own organisation, so much of that has come from the philanthropic side and from new partnerships. So I would imagine that in order for it to work well, it's a blend of the kind of benefactors working with Nitin's team, etc., and getting that in front, getting it into second gear, that we're able to actually put it into, write it into the budgets with some confidence that it's going to work and actually drive down costs, rather than as a trial status. Hey, we're in first gear, we want to try this thing to a traditional donor, because no one wants to do that. The incentive isn't there. So I think getting into third gear on a specific technology is kind of how I look at it. And certainly, just as an example, in Ukraine now, we're not the aim is not to let any NTS be reported in without that, without some remote UAV sensing accompanying it, you know, just as an output target, and we can budget for that now. Okay. Anybody else want to speculate on 2030? Here we are.
Thank you very much. I just want to comment about the question, what will mine clearance looks like into 2030. The other question is there any, let's say, master plan for make the changes between for the technology, the new technology, especially if we know that when the technology comes higher, the cost for clearance will be lower. So we have you any strategy plan to make the donors, the end users, the researchers, all these people to sit together, meeting, whatever, to make a new plan or a new strategy to reach 2030 with a new technology? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So from a Halo perspective, what I outlined there was a 5-year technology strategy starting from this year to 2030. Our approach to that with specific partners has been to really try and condense our research and development R&D partners external to Halo to a really focused group based on those location, detection, excavation pillars, and be quite selective, because any mine action organization here can probably tell you that your main organization inbox will often get what we call, you know, the good ideas club coming through, and there'll be ideas coming from different places around the world, and you've got to discern whether you want to give precious time to X or Y. Okay, it might be a really bad idea, and so you just put that one away. Some of them might be kind of good, you don't know where it's going to go, but do you give your time and attention to that? So we're trying to be really selective with partners to make sure that we're getting the best out of the right ones, and that's not easy. That's a job for our head of R&D, just to keep that quite controlled, and R&D officers lined up to a suitable number of partners that they can manage, and then obviously utilizing others.
Thank you very much. Can we have a small comment from GICHD? As a leader of the demining in the world. Thank you.
We're all leaders, I believe, in demining in all countries. We are trying to bring the stakeholders together. One, the innovation hub that we are promoting, advocating for, serves exactly that purpose. We're not looking at developing a strategy at this stage, but the first step should be to bring everyone who wants to be together, to sit together, and actually identify some of the main problems that exist in innovation and mine action. And what the GICHD will be working on, we want to start publishing quarterly or more frequently if possible, quick research agendas for academia, manufacturers, and many others on what are the real problems in the sector, so that the money can go in the right direction, so that research and innovation can all flow towards where the real problems are. And these problem statements or research agenda papers will not be developed by GICHD, it will be developed by the Innovation Hub, which has 65 different organizations that are part of it, and that will be split into different subgroups. Maybe we'll get to a stage where we will ask if the stakeholders want to develop this as a multi-year plan, but we're not there yet.
I'll just add to that, if I could. I think it's a good idea, because from my seat in the technology side of things, every week someone is promoting a new algorithm, a new approach, a new type of data, a new sensor, a new camera, a new drone, and at some point it becomes so overwhelming that you can't make any progress, because people are always asking for a prototype or to try out something, when often you already have a working solution that you can move forward with. And a big part of innovation it's not only choosing the right horse, but making sure that you keep that lane clear to reach full speed and not getting overwhelmed by reading exciting new news about artificial intelligence doing everything for you. I mean, there are real, solid, proven applications at this point, and yeah, point made.
I'm just going to see if anybody else would. Is it a follow-up to your? Yeah. By all means.
I thank you very much for your answer, but I mean that why we don't find a Dropbox for all people who are interested for this technology, like let's say general informations from universities, from researchers, because there is a lot of things in universities, there's a lot of studies, but doesn't follow up. And there's so many equipment is in the shelves until now. So if they have somewhere, whatever, it could be helpful for them.
It's a very good idea, and if I understand you correctly, you're talking about some kind of centralized repository of all data when it comes to innovation equipment. It's one of the plans for the Innovation Hub is to develop a centralized repository of all innovation that happened over the past X number of years that people can post. There's one but. Not everyone wants to share. So some people have methodology, technologies that are not comfortable to share it with everyone for IP reasons, for commercial purposes, and so on and so forth. But the plan is to create a website or a Dropbox, as you call it, with everything that we get agreement being posted there. Hopefully coming 2026. Early 2026, January 15th, 2026.
Right, we're coming to the end, but I want to give a chance for one last question, if anybody has, or we can finish on time. We've got one more.
Thank you for this presentation. I saw in France a prototype of flying drone who can destroy mines from 10 or 15 meters above the mine. Do you think that such a technology could be a game changer to prevent the risk for human deminers? Thank you.
I mean, we've seen a couple of examples. I don't know the one you're referring to exactly. I'm always interested to see. There's been a couple of iterations of drone-based sort of detection and then not excavation, but initiation or demolition of items. So we've seen that on a couple of examples before. Often the issue is vegetation in advance, so getting to the item, making sure that you have enough contact to produce sympathetic detonations so that you have, we're governed by UNMAS. Probability of detonation is important. We want to be 100% clear, 100% sure that this land is clear, etc. Ensuring that through aerial means, I haven't seen it succeed to the confidence levels that we would necessarily require yet. But if we're thinking about what mine action might look like in 5 or more years, then I could see there being some sort of role on the correct task. And I'll pass over here.
I would agree with everything Matt said, but I would also reiterate, is this what the national authorities want? Is it what the operators want? Is 99% of the time really going to destroy mine? And the answer will usually be not. 99% of the time goes to finding the mine, cutting the grass to get to the mine, excavating to the mine. So if what you're talking about is a delivery method or disposal method, this is 0.5% of the problem in speed. The mess will be the same if you do it on the ground, but potentially good technology, but there is more of a military use there. Quick find, quick destroy, go forward than humanitarian to me.
There is a good safety increase there, though.
I agree.
Okay, I think I've kept everybody long enough. I think we as panelists might stick around a little bit afterwards if anybody would like to come and continue the conversation. So thank you very much for your attention this late on a Friday.